The glass walls of the corner office on the 32nd floor offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline, but May Wong barely noticed it anymore. Instead, her attention was fixed on the stack of papers spread across her sleek desk, exit interviews from the past 3 months. As the youngest CEO in the tech industry at just 29, she had fought hard to prove herself worthy of leading tech-front solutions, but something wasn't right. May ran her fingers through her long black hair, a habit she developed during late-night coding sessions in college. The words from the exit interviews kept jumping out at her. Toxic middle management. No one listens to our concerns. There's a huge gap between the top and bottom. Each comment felt like a personal failure. Her phone buzzed with another calendar notification, another board meeting in 15 minutes where she had to pretend everything was fine. But was it? The company's numbers looked great on paper, but these testimonials told a different story. She thought back to her own early days, working her way up from a junior developer. Back then, she'd promised herself she'd never become one of those out-of-touch executives. What would Dad say? She wondered aloud, glancing at the small framed photo on her desk. Her father had built his restaurant business from scratch, and he always said the secret to his success was mopping the floors alongside his staff every Friday night. You can't lead people if you don't understand their daily struggles, he'd tell her. The memory sparked something in her mind. May stood up suddenly, walking to the window. Below, she could see tiny figures moving about, her employees, hundreds of them, all with their own stories, their own struggles. How many of them has she actually talked to since becoming CEO? Real conversations, not just polite nods in the elevator or rehearsed speeches at company events. She picked up her phone and called the one person she knew would give her honest feedback. "Hey Raj," she said when her HR director picked up. "Can you come to my office? I have an idea that might sound crazy." 10 minutes later, Raj sat across from her, his usual composed expression replaced by raised eyebrows. "You want to do what?" "Go undercover," May repeated, more confident now that she'd said it aloud. "As a janitor, for 1 month. Have you been watching too many reality shows?" Raj adjusted his glasses, but she could see the intrigue in his eyes. They'd worked together for 6 years, and he knew her well enough to realize she wasn't joking. "Look at these," she spread out the exit interviews. "We have a serious disconnect in this company. How can I fix problems I don't fully understand? PowerPoint presentations and quarterly reports only tell half the story." Raj picked up one of the papers, scanning it thoughtfully. "The board won't like it. Taking the CEO away for a month." "The board doesn't need to know." May leaned forward. "We can say I'm taking a strategic planning retreat. Companies do that all the time. Meanwhile, I'll be getting the most valuable market research possible, real, unfiltered feedback about how this company actually works." "And you think you can pull off being a janitor?" Raj couldn't help but smile. "No offense, but you've been living the executive life for a while now." May laughed, gesturing to her designer suit. "I know it sounds ridiculous, but remember where I came from? My parents' restaurant. I spent every summer through high school cleaning tables and scrubbing dishes. I'm not afraid of hard work." She pulled out her tablet and started taking notes. "I'll need a complete identity change. Different hair, maybe colored contacts. A background story that checks out if anyone gets curious. And most importantly, I need to learn how to actually do the job. I want to pull my weight, not just pretend." As she spoke, Raj's expression changed from skeptical to thoughtful. "You know what? This might actually work. But we'll need help. I know someone who used to work in film, does disguise consulting now. And we'll need to coordinate with the cleaning company we contract with." They spent the next hour brainstorming, the energy in the room building with each detail they figured out. By the time Raj stood up to leave, the plan was taking shape. Mai would become Lin Chen, a new hire with a simple backstory, a recent immigrant looking to build a new life, starting from the ground up. "One more thing," Raj paused at the door. "Are you sure about this? Once you see how things really work, you might not be able to unsee it." Mai looked again at the exit interviews on her desk, then at her father's photo. "That's exactly the point. Maybe it's time we all opened our eyes around here." After Raj left, May walked back to the window. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Soon the night shift would be starting, The invisible workforce that kept the building running while executives like her slept soundly in their beds. In just a few weeks, she'd be one of them. Her phone buzzed again, emails piling up, meetings to prepare for, decisions waiting to be made. But for the first time in months, May felt truly excited about the future. Something told her this crazy plan might just change everything, not just for her company, but for her too. Little did she know just how right she was. Standing in front of her bathroom mirror at 4:30 a.m., May hardly recognized herself. Gone was her signature long black hair, replaced by a shorter cut dyed dark brown with subtle gray streaks, aging her just enough to match her cover story. The colored contacts turned her dark brown eyes to a lighter shade, and the lack of makeup made her look completely different from her CEO persona. She touched her face gently, still getting used to the transformation. The past week had been a crash course in becoming someone else. The disguise consultant Raj hired, Mrs. Kim, had been ruthlessly thorough. It's not just about looking different, she'd explained while teaching Mai how to change her walk. It's about becoming a different person. Now, pulling on the navy blue uniform with the cleaning company's logo, Mai practiced her new identity in whispers. I'm Lin Chen. I moved here 6 months ago. I used to work in a small shop back home. The words felt strange on her tongue, but she'd practiced them countless times. Mrs. Kim had helped her add just a slight accent, not too much, just enough to be believable. Her phone buzzed with a text from Raj. Ready for your first day? May typed back with shaking hands. As ready as I'll ever be. She grabbed the packed lunch she'd prepared, nothing fancy, just the kind of simple meal someone on a janitor's salary would bring. Her designer handbag was replaced by a worn backpack bought from a thrift store. Even her wedding ring was gone, stored safely at home. Lin Chen was single, focused on building a new life. The city streets were eerily quiet as she walked to the bus stop. Usually, she'd be sleeping soundly at this hour, her alarm not set to go off for another 3 hours. The few people waiting for the early bus barely glanced at her, just another worker heading to an early morning shift. On the bus, Mai found herself studying her fellow passengers. A tired-looking nurse in scrubs dozed against the window. 2 construction workers discussed their project in hushed tones. A young man in a food service uniform played games on his phone. These were the people who kept the city running while others slept, she realized. How had she never really noticed them before? The bus dropped her off 2 blocks from Tech Front Solutions. She'd decided it would be too risky to drive her own car. Walking toward the familiar building felt surreal. She'd entered through the executive garage so many times, but now she headed toward the service entrance at the back. You must be Lin, a gravelly voice greeted her. An older man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes stood by the door, holding a ring of keys. I'm Uncle Wong. Not really anyone's uncle, but that's what everyone calls me. Ready for training? May nodded, trying to channel Lin's nervous energy. It wasn't hard. Her heart was racing. Yes, thank you for helping me learn. First thing, Uncle Wong said as he unlocked the door, forget everything you see in movies about janitors. This isn't about pushing a mop around looking sad. This is skilled work. Every floor has different needs, different schedules. You need to know which chemicals to use where, which machines do what, and most importantly, how to be invisible while getting everything done. The next hour was a whirlwind of information. Uncle Wong showed her the supply room, explaining the complex organizational system. He demonstrated how to properly dilute cleaning solutions, how to operate the floor buffer, and the correct way to dispose of different types of waste. Most important rule, he said seriously, never mix chemicals. Could be dangerous. Second most important rule, always knock before entering an office, even if you think nobody's there. You'd be surprised how many people work crazy hours in this place. As they worked their way through the building, May was surprised by how physically demanding the job was. By 7 a.m., her back ached from bending over trash bins, and her arms were tired from scrubbing bathroom tiles. Uncle Wong worked with practiced efficiency, barely breaking a sweat. You'll build up strength, he assured her, noticing her fatigue. Took me a month when I started. Speaking of which, time for our break. Come on, I'll show you where we eat. The break room was tucked away in the basement, a stark contrast to the sleek cafeteria upstairs. but the small space was warm and welcoming, with photos pinned to a bulletin board and the smell of coffee in the air. 2 other cleaners were already there, a middle-aged woman introduced as Auntie Rose and a quiet young man named David. "Ah, the new girl." Auntie Rose smiled warmly. "Come sit. I brought extra dumplings today. You're too skinny." May accepted the offered food gratefully, realizing how hungry she was. As they ate, she listened to their conversation, fascinated. They discussed their families, shared jokes about particularly messy offices, and talked about their dreams. David was taking online classes in computer programming. Auntie Rose's daughter had just been accepted to nursing school. "What about you, Lynn?" Uncle Wong asked. "What brought you here?" May swallowed hard, remembering her backstory. I want to build a better life. Back home, I had a small shop, but here, I start from beginning. Learn new things." "Don't we all?" Auntie Rose patted her hand. "Everyone has to start somewhere. You'll see, we take care of each other here." The break ended too quickly, and soon they were back to work. As the building came to life around them, May watched the early arrivers, her employees, stream in. They walked past her without a second glance, talking on phones or tapping at tablets. She recognized faces from meetings and presentations, but they didn't recognize her. It was like being invisible. By the end of her shift, May's muscles ached in places she didn't know could ache. But as she waited for the bus home, she felt strangely satisfied. She'd done real, tangible work today. And more importantly, she'd gotten her first glimpse into a world she never really knew existed in her own building. Back in her apartment, she sent a quick text to Raj. "Day 1 complete. You won't believe what I've learned already." Then she fell into bed, still in her uniform, too tired to even change. As she drifted off to sleep, she thought about Uncle Wong's words about being invisible. How many other invisible people kept her company running? And what else would she discover in the days to come? After a week on the job, May was starting to see her company through entirely different eyes. The pristine hallways she once walked through proudly now told stories of struggle and dedication. Each clean surface represented someone's hard work, work that most people never noticed until something went wrong. Tonight, she was working alongside Uncle Wong on the 18th floor when they encountered their first real challenge. The floor buffer, an ancient machine that had clearly seen better days, sputtered and died right in the middle of the main corridor. "Not again," Uncle Wong sighed, kneeling beside the machine. He jiggled a few wires and pressed the power button repeatedly, but nothing happened. "Third time this month. I've put in 5 requests to replace this thing." Mai frowned, remembering all the fancy coffee machines and ergonomic chairs she'd approved for the executive floors without a second thought. Why haven't they fixed it? Uncle Wong shrugged, his face resigned. Budget priorities, they say. Maintenance equipment isn't as important as client-facing amenities. He pulled out his phone and showed her a chain of emails, each one passing the request to a different department, none taking responsibility. They ended up having to finish the floor by hand, on their knees with scrub brushes. As they worked, the night security guard, Mr. Lee, passed by and shook his head sympathetically. "You folks shouldn't have to deal with this," he said, stopping to chat. "You know what gets me? They spent thousands last month on that new digital art display in the lobby, but they can't spare a few hundred for basic equipment." May felt her face grow hot with shame. She remembered approving that art display, thinking it would improve the company's image. Now, her knees aching against the hard floor, that decision seemed incredibly out of touch. Later that night, during their break, May noticed something else. The break room's small refrigerator was making an awful noise, and the microwave had tape holding its door shut. Even the chairs were mismatched and worn, salvaged from various office clearouts over the years. "You should have seen this place last summer," David said, carefully balancing his container of leftovers on the wobbly table. "The air conditioning broke, and it took 3 weeks to fix it. We were working in 90-degree heat, but when we complained, they just told us to drink more water." Auntie Rose nodded, fanning herself at the memory. "Remember when that fancy consulting firm came to do an office evaluation? They never even came down here. How can they evaluate working conditions if they don't see where all of us take our breaks?" As they talked, May noticed other things too. The way they helped each other out without being asked. Auntie Rose sharing her homemade meals, David fixing Uncle Wong's phone when it acted up, everyone pitching in when someone needed to leave early for a family emergency. They were more than co-workers. They were a family. But not everything she observed was heartwarming. One night, while cleaning the executive bathrooms on the 30th floor, she overheard two middle managers talking as they washed their hands. "Can you believe the cleaning staff asked for new equipment again?" one said, rolling her eyes. "Like we don't have better things to spend money on." "I know, right?" The other laughed. "My kid could do their job. It's not exactly rocket science." May gripped her mop handle tightly, fighting the urge to speak up. These were the same managers who'd given passionate presentations about company culture and employee appreciation. The disconnect was stunning. The worst moment came when she was emptying trash bins in the marketing department. A young executive was working late, and without looking up from his phone, he kicked an empty coffee cup toward her. "You missed this one," he said dismissively, still not making eye contact. For a moment, May just stood there, the cup at her feet. In her real life, this same executive had smiled at her in meetings, laughed at her jokes, praised her leadership. Now, he couldn't even be bothered to look at her face. But there were bright spots too. The software development team on the 25th floor always cleaned up after themselves and left thank you notes for the cleaning staff. A kind-hearted receptionist kept a secret stash of good coffee in her desk and shared it with the morning cleaning crew. And there was the elderly accountant who learned all their names and asked about their families. One particularly memorable night, they were cleaning up after a big office party on the 27th floor. The place was a mess, cakes smashed into the carpet, drinks spilled everywhere, decorations strewn about. It would take hours to clean, but then something unexpected happened. A group of junior developers who'd stayed late saw them struggling with the mess. Without a word, they got up from their desks and started helping, picking up trash, wiping down surfaces, even moving furniture back into place. "You guys shouldn't have to deal with this alone," one young developer said, carefully removing tape from the walls. "We're all part of the same company, right?" May watched this scene unfold, fighting back tears. This was what she'd wanted her company to be when she became CEO, a place where everyone looked out for each other, where titles didn't matter as much as basic human dignity. That night, after her shift, she sat on the bus home and made detailed notes on her phone. Every broken machine, every dismissive comment, every act of kindness, she recorded it all. But more importantly, she wrote down how it felt to be on the receiving end of both the contempt and the compassion. As the city lights flickered past the bus window, May thought about how she used to end her days as CEO, reviewing reports, analyzing data, making decisions that affected thousands of people. Now she ended them with aching muscles, calloused hands, and a much clearer understanding of what those decisions really meant at ground level. Her phone buzzed with a text from Raj. "How's it going?" She typed back slowly. "I'm learning more than I ever did in business school. This company needs to change, Raj. And when I'm done here it will." 2 weeks into her undercover mission, May found herself looking forward to the quiet moments with her new work family. Tonight, they were having their usual midnight break, gathered around the wobbly break room table. Uncle Wom was sharing his famous homemade mooncakes. It was the Mid-Autumn Festival, and despite being at work, they were determined to celebrate. "My mother's recipe," he said proudly, watching as everyone took their first bites. "She always said good food makes any workplace better." "These are amazing," David exclaimed, already reaching for a second piece. "Almost as good as my grandmother's." He winked at Uncle Wom, who pretended to look offended. As they ate, Auntie Rose pulled out her phone to show them her daughter's latest achievement, an award for outstanding performance in her nursing program. Everyone gathered around, genuinely excited for her success. Speaking of success, Uncle Wom turned to Mai. "Lynn, you're learning fast. Never seen anyone pick up the buffer technique so quickly." May blushed, remembering how she'd nearly crushed the machine into a wall on her first day. "I have good teachers," she said softly. It wasn't just flattery. She'd learned more about leadership from watching Uncle Wom manage their small team than she had from any business owner. Their break was interrupted by an urgent call. Someone had spilled coffee all over the conference room floor on the 29th floor right before an important early morning meeting. Without hesitation, they all pitched in to help, even though it wasn't technically their assigned area. As they cleaned, May noticed how seamlessly they worked together. Uncle Wong naturally took the lead, but he never had to give orders. Everyone just knew what needed to be done and did it. It was so different from the endless meetings and email chains she was used to as CEO. Later that night, while restocking supplies, David opened up to her about his dreams. "You know, I'm almost done with my programming course," he said, showing her some code on his phone. "Been studying every spare minute for 2 years." "That's impressive," May said, genuinely amazed by his dedication. "Why not apply for a job in the tech department here?" David's face fell slightly. "I tried. Twice. But they never even looked at my application. The hiring manager said they prefer candidates from traditional backgrounds." He shrugged, trying to hide his disappointment. "Maybe they're right. Who'd want to hire a janitor as a programmer?" May felt her heart sink. She'd always prided herself on running a company that valued talent and hard work. But here was clear evidence that invisible barriers still existed, barriers she'd been completely unaware of. The night took an unexpected turn when they encountered Mr. Chen, no relation to May's undercover identity, the elderly accountant who always worked late. Usually cheerful, tonight he was sitting at his desk, looking distressed. "Everything okay, Mr. Chen?" Uncle Wong asked as they emptied his trash bin. The old man sighed heavily. "My grandson is in the hospital. Nothing serious, but," he gestured at the pile of work on his desk. "I should be there with my family, but this report is due tomorrow morning." Without missing a beat, Auntie Rose pulled up a chair. "Tell us about your grandson while you work. Sometimes talking helps." For the next hour, as they cleaned his office and the surrounding area, they listened to Mr. Chen talk about his family, offering words of comfort and support. When they finally finished their shift, Mr. Chen stopped them. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "every night you come here, clean everything, make it nice for us. But tonight you cleaned my heart too." His eyes were misty as he thanked them. Walking to the bus stop that morning, May found herself thinking about community. In her years as CEO, she'd approved countless team-building exercises and corporate retreats, all designed to create the kind of bonds she was now experiencing naturally with the cleaning staff. On the bus ride home, she watched a young mother juggling a baby and a work uniform, probably heading to her own early morning shift. 2 construction workers helped her with her stroller without being asked. A teenager offered his seat to an elderly man. Small moments of humanity happening all around her, the kind of moments she'd been too busy to notice before. Her phone buzzed with a message from Raj. "Board meeting today. Everyone asking where you are. Told them your strategic retreat is going well." She smiled, thinking about how much more strategic this retreat was turning out to be than any corporate planning session. She typed back, "It is, but we need to talk about our hiring practices when I get back. And our maintenance budget. And about a dozen other things." Back in her apartment, May added to her growing list of observations and ideas. But today, instead of focusing on problems, she wrote about solutions. Ideas sparked by watching how Uncle Wong managed their team, how they supported each other, how they turned mundane tasks into meaningful moments. As she finally drifted off to sleep, she thought about David's coding dreams, Mr. Chen's grateful eyes, and Uncle Wong's mooncakes. She'd started this mission thinking she would learn about what was wrong with her company. Instead, she was learning about what was right with the people who kept it running and how much potential was being wasted by not seeing them clearly. Her last thought before falling asleep was about the morning's team meeting she was missing. Somehow, the polished presentations and carefully prepared reports seemed less important now than the simple wisdom she'd gained sharing mooncakes in a basement break room. The crisis hit Tech Front Solutions on a quiet Tuesday morning. Mai was just finishing her shift when she noticed something unusual. Executives were arriving much earlier than normal, their faces tense with worry. Through snippets of overheard conversations in the hallways, she learned that Globaltech, their biggest client, was threatening to pull their contract. $3 million, she heard one manager say into his phone. They're talking about taking $3 million of business elsewhere because of service issues. Mai's stomach churned. She knew exactly how significant that contract was. She'd helped secure it herself just last year. But now, watching from ground level, she was about to see how her company handled crisis from a completely different perspective. By that evening, when she arrived for her next shift, the atmosphere in the building had changed dramatically. The usual steady hum of office life was replaced by a frantic energy. People were running between meetings, shouting into phones, and working well past their normal hours. "Something big must be happening," Uncle Wong commented as they prepared their cleaning carts. "Last time I saw this many people here after hours was during the system crash last year." The next few days were intense. With more people working late, their usual cleaning routine had to adapt constantly. They found themselves navigating around impromptu meetings in corridors, cleaning up after hastily ordered takeout dinners, and dealing with the mess left by stressed-out employees who were too preoccupied to think about tediness. "Fourth coffee spill today." Auntie Rose sighed, mopping up yet another puddle. "People are so worried about losing their jobs, they're not even seeing straight anymore." May felt a pang of guilt. As CEO, she'd always tried to shield her employees from the stress of big problems. But now she realized that the stress trickled down anyway. It just affected different people in different ways. The pressure from upper management was becoming obvious. Middle managers, desperate to show they were addressing the client's concerns, were micromanaging everyone beneath them. The cleaning staff wasn't exempt from this increased scrutiny. "They want us to change our whole schedule," Uncle Wong explained during their break, showing everyone an email on his phone. "They're saying we need to clean the client meeting rooms 3 times a day now, but they're not giving us any extra help or hours to do it." "How are we supposed to manage that?" David asked, looking worried. "We're already stretched thin with the regular schedule." May watched as Uncle Wong thought for a moment, then pulled out a piece of paper and started drawing a rough map of their cleaning routes. "Okay, if we reorganize like this," he began, and soon everyone was contributing ideas. They found ways to adjust their routines, support each other during busy periods, and still maintain their high standards. What impressed May most was how they approached the problem. There were no complaints about the extra work, no pointing fingers. Instead, they focused on solutions, working together to figure out how to help the company through this tough time, even though most of them had never even met the client in question. One night, while cleaning the executive conference room after a particularly tense meeting, May overheard 2 board members talking in hushed tones. "Where is May Wong anyway?" one asked. "The CEO should be here dealing with this crisis, not off on some strategic planning retreat." "Rage says she's working on something important," the other replied. "But the timing couldn't be worse. We need leadership right now." May felt torn. Part of her wanted to reveal herself right then, to jump in and help solve the crisis the way she normally would. But another part of her realized she was learning crucial lessons about her company that she might never have discovered otherwise. The situation reached a breaking point when the cleaning staff discovered that the executive bathroom on the client meeting floor had a major plumbing issue just hours before a crucial meeting with Global Tech representatives. "Maintenance won't be able to get here until tomorrow," Mr. Lee, the security guard, informed them grimly. Something about union rules and after-hours calls. May watched as her co-workers exchanged looks. Without a word, Uncle Wong pulled out his phone and made a call. 10 minutes later, his brother-in-law, a retired plumber, arrived with his tools. Together, they worked for 2 hours straight, fixing the issue just in time. When a grateful executive tried to offer payment, Uncle Wong simply smiled and said, "We're all part of the same team, right? This company needs this meeting to go well." That moment hit Mai hard. While highly paid executives and managers were scrambling to save the contract with presentations and promises, it was the invisible workers who were quietly solving real problems, going above and beyond without recognition or reward. Later that night, as they'd all sat exhausted in the break room, Auntie Rose brought out some of her special ginger tea. "For stress," she said, pouring cups for everyone. "My mother always said good tea helps you see things clearly." As they sipped their tea, they talked about their hopes for the company, their worries about job security, and their ideas for making things better. May listened, amazed by their insights and their genuine care for a company that often seemed to overlook them. "You know what's funny?" David said, staring into his teacup. "The clients keep complaining about service, but they never see the real service, the people who stay late to clean up their messes, who fix things before they break, who keep everything running smoothly behind the scenes. May nodded, thinking about all the presentations she'd sat through about company values and customer service. None of them had captured what she was seeing now, the real meaning of dedication and teamwork. Walking home in the early morning light, May made a decision. The crisis wasn't just about keeping a client happy, it was about recognizing and fixing the disconnect between different levels of her company. When she returned to her role as CEO, things would have to change. But first, she had more to learn from the people who saw her company from the ground up. The morning of the big reveal started like any other. May arrived early for her cleaning shift, her heart racing with the knowledge that everything was about to change. She'd spent hours the night before preparing for this moment, but now that it was here, she felt strangely nervous. "Lynn, you look pale," Uncle Wong said as she entered the break room. "Are you feeling okay?" "Just tired," she replied, managing a small smile. In truth, she was worried about how these people, who had become like family to her, would react when they learned her true identity. The crisis with Globaltech had been resolved the previous day, largely thanks to the behind-the-scenes efforts of the maintenance and cleaning staff. The client representatives had been impressed by the immaculate facilities and smooth operation of everything during their visit. Of course, nobody in the executive meetings knew about Uncle Wong's brother-in-law fixing the bathroom, or how the cleaning team had worked double shifts to make everything perfect. As they gathered for their usual morning meeting, Raj sent her a text. "Everything's ready. Good luck." At 9 a.m., an announcement came over the building's speaker system. "Attention all Tech Front Solutions employees. Please gather in the main auditorium for an important company-wide meeting at 10 a.m. "That's weird," David commented. "They never include us in company meetings." "Maybe it's about the Globaltech contract," Auntie Rose suggested. "I hope everyone gets to keep their jobs." May watched as her co-workers discussed whether they should attend. Usually, the cleaning staff wasn't explicitly invited to company gatherings, but this time was different. Rage had made sure the announcement specifically mentioned LL employees. "We should go," Uncle Wong decided. "If nothing else, we can see what all the fuss is about." At 10 a.m., the auditorium was packed. May saw the clear divide. Executives and office workers in the front rows, support staff hovering uncertainly at the back. Her cleaning team found spots along the wall, looking slightly out of place in their work uniforms. Raj stepped onto the stage, looking unusually nervous. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. As you know, our CEO, Ms. Wong, has been away on what we called a strategic planning retreat. Today, she's back with some important insights to share." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Many people were probably expecting to see Mai stride onto the stage in her usual power suit. Instead, she took a deep breath and stepped forward from where she stood with the cleaning staff, still wearing her janitor's uniform. The room fell silent. She could see the confusion on people's faces as they tried to process what they were seeing. Uncle Wong's eyes widened in recognition. David's mouth fell open. Auntie Rose grabbed the wall for support. "Hello, everyone," May said, her voice shaking slightly as she walked to the stage. "For the past 3 weeks, I haven't been on a retreat. I've been working as a member of our cleaning staff, under the name Lin Chen." The silence broke into shocked whispers. She saw some executives shift uncomfortably in their seats, probably remembering their recent interactions with the new janitor. "I learned more in these 3 weeks than I have in 3 years as CEO," she continued. "I learned that leadership isn't about corner offices and executive decisions. It's about people like Uncle Wong, who solves problems without being asked. Like Auntie Rose, who creates community wherever she goes. Like David, who pursues his dreams while working full-time." She went on to describe specific moments: the broken buffer machine, the late-night crisis solutions, the way the team supported each other. With each example, she could see recognition dawn on different faces in the audience. "But I also learned some hard truths," she said. "I learned that some of us have forgotten what respect looks like. That we've created invisible barriers between different levels of employees. That we spend thousands on decorative art while our maintenance staff works with broken equipment." The uncomfortable shifting in the audience increased. She saw one of the managers who had dismissed the cleaning staff's equipment requests sink lower in his seat. "Starting today, things will change," May announced. She outlined her plans. a complete overhaul of the maintenance budget, a new career development program open to all employees, mandatory rotation periods for managers to work alongside support staff, and several other initiatives she'd developed based on her experiences. But the biggest change, she said, needs to come from all of us. We need to remember that every person in this building, regardless of their job title, is essential to our success. The recent crisis with Global Tech wasn't solved by executive strategies alone. It was solved by people like Uncle Juan's brother-in-law coming in at midnight to fix a bathroom, by our cleaning staff working extra hours without complaint, by security guards going above and beyond their duties. She looked at her cleaning team, still standing by the wall. I owe these people an apology. I deceived you about who I was, even while you welcomed me into your family. But you taught me more about leadership, community, and dedication than any business school ever could. To everyone's surprise, Uncle Wong started clapping. Auntie Rose joined in, tears in her eyes. Soon, the whole auditorium was filled with applause. As the meeting ended, May watched people who had never interacted before starting conversations. The head of it was talking to David about the programming courses he was taking. The facilities manager was having an intense discussion with Uncle Wong about equipment needs. Auntie Rose was surrounded by a group of young executives, all asking for her famous dumpling recipe. Well played, Raj said quietly as he joined her. Though I have to say, that uniform doesn't quite suit you. May laughed, looking down at her janitor's clothes. Actually, I think it suits me perfectly. It reminds me of what real work looks like. As people filed out of the auditorium, she overheard snippets of conversation, people processing what had happened. But the comment that stuck with her most came from a young intern she heard saying to his colleague, "You know what's cool? Our CEO didn't just talk about understanding all levels of the company, she actually lived it." 6 months had passed since May's revelation, and Tech Front Solutions had undergone a remarkable transformation. Walking through the building on a quiet morning, she smiled at the changes she could see everywhere. The basement break room, once cramped and forgotten, had been completely renovated. Now it was a bright, welcoming space with comfortable furniture and proper appliances. But more importantly, it wasn't just for maintenance staff anymore. Employees from all departments could be found there, sharing meals and conversations. "Try these," Auntie Rose said, offering a plate of her famous dumplings to a group of software developers who had wandered in. "My mother always said food brings people together." The developers, who once would have eaten only in the upstairs cafeteria, now regularly sought out Auntie Rose's cooking and company. The old floor buffer that had caused so many problems was gone, replaced by new efficient equipment. But that wasn't the most significant change. Now, every purchase request from the maintenance team was given the same priority as executive requests. Uncle Wong, who had been promoted to facilities operations manager, made sure every department had what they needed to do their jobs properly. "It's not about the money," he'd explained in a recent management meeting. "It's about respect. When we give people the right tools, we're saying their work matters." David's story had perhaps shown the most visible transformation. After May learned about his programming skills, she'd created a new company policy. Any employee who showed initiative in learning new skills would be given a chance to prove themselves. David now split his time between the maintenance department and junior software development, his experience giving him a unique perspective that proved invaluable in creating practical solutions. "You know what's funny?" he told May one day. "Some of our best coding solutions came from thinking like a janitor, finding the simplest, most efficient way to clean up problems." The management rotation program had caused quite a stir initially. Every manager now had to spend 1 week each quarter working alongside the maintenance and support staff. The first group had been reluctant, but the results were undeniable. Managers who had once dismissed maintenance requests now understood the importance of every role in the company. The young executive who had kicked the coffee cup toward May during her undercover days had been transformed by the experience. After his rotation week, he'd become one of the strongest advocates for workplace respect. Now he ran a monthly discussion group about breaking down workplace hierarchies. But the most significant changes weren't in the policies or programs, they were in the daily interactions. Security guards were greeted by name. Cleaning staff were included in team celebrations. The invisible barriers between different levels of employees had begun to crumble. One morning, May arrived extra early to find Mr. Lee, the security guard, helping a new intern figure out how to work the coffee machine. "Everyone struggles their first week," he said kindly. "You'll get the hang of it." This simple interaction would have been unlikely 6 months ago. The global tech crisis that had seemed so devastating had actually become a turning point. Not only had they kept the contract, but their client had been so impressed by the company's transformation that they'd increased their business. Other clients noticed too. TechFront's reputation for having an exceptional workplace culture was attracting new partnerships. "You know what the best part is?" Raj asked during their weekly meeting. "Our turnover rate has dropped by 60%. People want to stay because they feel valued no matter what job they do." May still kept her janitor's uniform hanging in her office as a reminder. Sometimes, when facing a difficult decision, she'd look at it and ask herself what Lin Chen would think. The perspective she'd gained during those 3 weeks continued to influence her leadership. 1 year after her undercover journey, TechFront Solutions was featured in a business magazine as a model of workplace culture. The article praised their innovative approach to breaking down workplace hierarchies, but May knew the real story was simpler. They just remembered that every person deserves respect, dignity, and the chance to contribute their best. The old basement break room table, wobbly legs and all, now sat in a corner of the renovated space. Nobody wanted to replace it. It had become a symbol of the changes they'd been through. Every morning, people from all levels of the company gathered around it, sharing stories, solving problems, and building real connections. Uncle Wong still brought his mooncakes during the Mid-Autumn Festival, but now it was a company-wide celebration. Auntie Rose's cooking had become legendary, and she'd started teaching monthly cooking classes after work, attended by everyone from junior staff to executives. David had created a mentoring program for other employees who wanted to learn new skills, inspired by his own journey. One evening, as May was leaving work, she passed the cleaning crew, now equipped with proper tools and treated with respect by all. They were laughing and chatting with some late-working developers, all sharing pizza as they went about their tasks. The scene reminded her of something her father used to say about his restaurant. "Success isn't just about the food you serve, it's about how you treat the people who help you serve it." As she walked to her car, May reflected on how a simple decision to go undercover had led to such profound changes. The company's profits were higher than ever, but that wasn't what made her proudest. It was seeing people from all levels working together, supporting each other, and creating a workplace where everyone could thrive. The security guard called out a goodbye as she left, and May smiled, remembering how invisible these interactions used to be. Sometimes the biggest changes come from simply opening your eyes to what was there all along and having the courage to make things right.